I'm going to try my absolute hardest not to be super sniffly in this video, but I am sick, as you might be able to tell. I'm not surprised I'm sick. I was at a 10,000 person techno rave event on Saturday, and that is just definitely where I've got this from. But I'm just considering it as like I'm strengthening my immune system, so we will survive. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this book, Alan Watts' The Wisdom of Insecurity, which I've just finished, and it was excellent. And I had many thoughts as I was reading, and I thought we could/should discuss them. As you can see, it was many a note taken as I went through. But first I thought we'd do a little bit of context, just a tiny bit, and then get into some of the things that he discusses and my thoughts on them and why I think you should read it as well. So firstly, a little bit of context. So this was written in 1951. We're just out of the Second World War, straight into the Cold War. I'm saying we as if I was there, but in Alan Watts' time in America, we're coming off a high, we won the war, yippee, but in the process we have invented nuclear weapons. Slightly less of a, yippee sort of mood, but we're feeling good. We're able to purchase things again. Society is getting back to normal, especially in America. This is kind of the American dream sort of era. People have money, they can afford to do different things, but also, as will be relevant in this, I think people are starting to experience some of the downsides of that like consumer lifestyle and realizing there is a certain emptiness that comes with buying things and thinking that you just need kind of the next level up and then you'll feel happy, you'll feel satisfied with life. There's a lot of that kind of playing into this and it makes sense with the time. So Alan Watts was born and raised in the UK. He was born in Kent, fun fact, in like 1915 or 1913 or something like that. But then went over to America at university age and stayed there for a long time. And this book was written when he was living in California, as far as I am aware. And at this point he'd kind of already gained a certain level of like notoriety within the community. The spiritual, religious, philosophical, Eastern religion style community. He had been trained as a Zen Buddhist monk, but I think he did leave his Zen Buddhism school. He didn't really get on with his teacher, which is kind of interesting. So I feel like that's not really the point of Zen Buddhism. You're sort of meant to be Zen about things, I would have thought. But I don't know. I have not trained as a Zen Buddhist monk, so... Anyway, let's get into the themes of this. So this is The Wisdom of Insecurity, a message for an age of anxiety. Felt relevant. Walking through the bookshop, I thought, yep, sounds like something I need to read. And I would say it's sort of timeless, although you can see how it links to the themes, like the contextual themes I was just talking about. Overall, I really enjoyed it. Like it's short, it's only 150 pages. There's a lot in it, but also it's repeating very much the same themes over and over, which initially I was like, yeah, we get it. So the whole point of the book, I guess, the number one theme running throughout is that all we have is the present moment. Any attempt to believe otherwise, that there is something other than the present moment, is mistaking you and kind of leading you astray and not enriching your life. And I think many of us have heard this so many times at this point, it's become even more familiar in popular culture, but it's a part of many religions, particularly Eastern religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, the emphasis on like all you have is the here and now, and to be present, a focus on being present in this moment here. I think we've all heard that now, and I'd sort of heard that a million times. But as you read, he expresses that same idea in new, interesting ways and using different analogies that I hadn't thought of before, that helped me understand the same concept from multiple angles, which I actually think was really helpful. Because my number one takeaway has kind of been, well, not number one takeaway, my number one like thought I kept having as I was reading is like, you can really know rationally the importance of living in this present moment, and you can understand intellectually that the only thing we have really is this present moment at any given time. That's the only thing we have. We can reflect on the past. We can use our present moment to reflect on the past. We can use our present moment to look forward into the future. But all we ever have is right here and now. You can know that. It's really hard to live that. It's really hard to experience that and absorb that into your person. And I think the way that this book repeats the same ideas but expresses them in new ways really helps drive the message home and helps you absorb it more fully, I think. So I really enjoyed it, and I honestly would recommend. It's not like other philosophy where sometimes I think you don't gain a huge amount from reading the original. I think this is super accessible, and I think it would be an enjoyable read for many, many people. So yeah, but let's talk through some of the different ideas that he touches upon. So the first point he makes, like through the start of the book, is about how it's totally natural for us to hold these beliefs in unchanging things, think that we can pin something down and hold on to concrete things that really exist and don't change. It's natural because constant change is insecure, it's anxiety inducing, it's nerve-wracking. If you can't grasp onto anything solid, life feels in this constant... It's interesting actually that this links so much to the previous video. I do tend to find this, the more I think about different topics, the more I just end up seeing all of the connections between them all. And then I get a bit confused as I'm speaking because I'm like half thinking about how this relates to everything else. But we'll go back and try that again. So all of us, it's a natural human thing to create these anchors of stability within society. And these can be anything. We cling on to kind of economic theories, scientific theories, religious mythology, anything which can give us a lovely, stable, secure, concrete view of the way that we should understand the world. That's satisfying and stabilizing to a human mind. We want that knowledge. We want something definite and secure. Literally, this is exactly what I was saying in the last video. This is what Plato was looking for with his concrete forms. It seems to be such a natural human instinct to aim to define things, to put things into categories and boxes. That feels helpful to us. We can categorize and we can move on. We can feel like, okay, this is good, this is bad, this is true, this is false. And what Alan Watts is saying, I don't know whether it feels strange to call him what Watts is saying, but then it feels strange to say what Alan is saying. So I'm probably just going to use both names the whole way through. Or maybe we just go for Alan. We go for a quite informal approach. I don't know. The thing is that trying to cling on to these certainties, these sureties, is actually making us quite miserable. And the reason for that is that the change between the two is what life is. Life is not just one thing or another thing. That's a complete mistake. And so let's give a really simple example. He talks about this rule of opposites, and that pleasure is only pleasurable because we've experienced pain, and pain is only painful because we've experienced pleasure. Trying to cling on to one, trying to make pleasure your constant, would not be pleasurable. Any pleasurable thing taken to the extreme becomes unpleasurable now. If we try to cling on to pleasure, we actually reduce the pleasure that we experience. And to try to cling on to either one or the other, he describes it as even a partial suicide, like you're cutting off what it means to actually experience those things. Like, to experience life, to live, is to go through this constant change and evolution, and to try and fix it at any one point in any, it doesn't just have to be a pleasure or painful way, to try to contain what life is, to box it in, is to miss the whole point. And not just to miss the whole point, but it's almost ignorant, because it's impossible to do. It's just an impossible task. And he makes this point that so many of us are so worried about trying to pin down pleasurable experiences and avoid painful experiences that we never even get to live them when they actually arrive. So I'm sure many of us have heard this saying that, you can't, like, I hated this saying when someone told it to me once when I was feeling particularly miserable, and I felt violently aggrieved at them for doing so. But it's that phrase, it's like, oh, depression is only like you're reflecting on a past experience and feeling sad about it. And anxiety is only looking forward to a future experience and anticipating it. And actually you can avoid either of those experiences by just being right where you are in the present. I remember that time finding that very frustrating, but that is kind of in effect what Alan Watts is saying, in that we look back on our past experiences and we decide, okay, which of those do I want and which of those do I not want? And then we spend our present time fretting about how we're going to avoid those painful experiences in the future, and how we can maximize the pleasurable experiences in the future. But the problem is, if we constantly spend our present moment fretting about avoiding a negative experience or hoping for a positive experience, we never actually get to enjoy that experience when it arrives here in this present moment. He talks a lot about making money. I think that's one way in which we've all seen this, in that people who really prioritize making money and making money and making money, it seems there never comes a point when you have made, like, when do you get to enjoy that? And maybe some people will say that they're enjoying it along the way, they're getting to, but if you're constantly spending those times, even if you've paid to go on a luxury yacht, I don't know, but you're on the yacht thinking about, okay, well, this yacht is so good, I need to make sure I'm on more yachts in the future, so I need to make more money. Like, if you're constantly taking yourself out of your brain into a imagined future experience and going, I need to avoid avoid a negative experience in the future or create a positive experience, you never actually get to just go with whatever the feeling is that you're experiencing in the present. Editing me coming to you from the future, even more sick than before. I actually need to acquire some paracetamol or something. But I was thinking about this. I have only actually been able to put that lesson into practice like in the past year or so, and I probably heard about that literally 10 years ago, and it's only been in the past year that I've really been able to actually absorb what that means. And whenever I get incredibly overwhelmed or anxious, I am able to then go, how am I feeling right now in this moment? I'm almost always okay in the exact moment that I'm in right now, and that's all I have to worry about. In any future moment, I can ask myself again, am I okay right now? And when my answer to that question is no, then I can do something about it. And that has actually really calmed me down. So I went on like the biggest solo traveling trip I've done this year. And a few days before I left, I started getting really, really nervous. I just kept going through like scenarios in my head, feeling really anxious in my body. And I kept asking myself, am I okay right now? Well, yeah, I'm in my house. I'm the place I am every single day. I'm doing the same things I do. I'm okay right now. Okay, well then that's all I have to worry about. In any of the future moments, wherever I may find myself traveling around the world, I can ask myself this question, am I okay right now? And when the answer is no, then I can do something about it. And that has genuinely been really powerful. But I think when someone tells you that when you're feeling bad, you don't want to hear it. You have to like inception yourself. You have to plant the idea deep in your own head and then come back to it yourself and rediscover it and be like, wow, this is such a brainwave idea from me. You need to not hear it from someone else, I think. Also, this idea he talks about of like collapsing the future, the past, and the present are all just one moment. Like when we live in the future in our head, we're doing that from the present, and when we live in the past in our head, we're doing that from the present. The present moment, this moment right now, is all there ever is. I've just started watching Dark, so like time and the collapsing of time into just one singular event. No one spoil it for me, please, because I'm only like halfway through the first season, but it's really on my mind at the moment. I want to do maybe. I did philosophy of time at uni, one module in it, and it was so mind bending. I feel like that's a whole other kettle of fish, maybe for another time. Throughout this book, I did have one or two opposing thoughts or just questions I would like to ask him or read more of his work so that I can figure out. And one was that thinking ahead and the ability to predict and aim to avoid certain situations, the ability for forethought, has been a massive biological advantage. Like, the only reason humans are where we are today is because we have the ability to think ahead to what might happen and act in the present in accordance with, something we hope to maximize and something we hope to minimize. I hope to minimize my threat via, even our ability to like figure out, what germs are and how to avoid disease, because we've thought about it and gone, I don't really want that. I actually don't really want to die of that mysterious illness that this other peasant folk has got over there. I'm gonna try and figure out. And some of those were silly approaches, tying a bag of herbs to your nose during the Black Plague. It wasn't actually helpful. It was a nice idea. It might have worked. And that kind of thinking ahead is what has allowed us to survive in many situations. So I wonder what Alan Watts would have said about that. if I had to presuppose his answer, I think on one hand he might say, because he praises a lot like the innate wisdom of animals in that when they are in pain, they are in pain. And when they are experiencing pleasure, they experience pleasure. They are much more in tune with the moment than we are. And in some ways, I think he would say he's not sure we do have an advantage. Obviously, we have created some kind of more advanced, in many respects, society. But is it more emotionally advanced? Is it more wise? I'm not sure what he would say to that. I would like to know. If any of you are in touch with the ghost of Alan Watts, please do let me know. Let me know what you think his response would be. So then reflecting on this idea of like the inevitable changing, constant changing thing that life is, and our fight to build some consistency. We seem to have developed this I in our heads that we feel has some level of stability to it. You know, we are able to reflect on our memories, we keep this constant sense of self, we have a consistent I who moves through the world and acts in accordance with this set of beliefs that we've built up about who we are. And he makes a contrast between an I versus me, and me is just the living animal that I am, going through and experiencing the highs and lows of life. And I is the sort of overlooker who judges those experiences and considers them, you know, tries to categorize them as they move into the past and tries to anticipate things which will come up in the future. And this tension between I and me is what he would aim to reduce. He's sort of saying that the I is getting in the way of our life, of our experience. I'm truly trying to avoid saying, oh, it's the I is like negatively impacting us, or the I is leading to a negative experience, because I don't think he's saying that negative experiences are to be avoided. It's just that it's somehow a mistake. We've just made it. It's just an incorrect belief to think that there is this separate I that can impose stability on our experience of the world. He's just saying that's just fundamentally not true. That all we are is this changing, flowing, ebb and flow of life. He's putting it much more eloquently, I'm sure, than I am, but I'm trying to summarise 150 pages, I guess, into a shorter video. I also wanted to read some little sections that I've highlighted so many things. Yeah, one analogy he keeps coming back to is this idea of to hold your breath is to lose your breath, in that we are trying to hold on to something that we want. We're trying to hold on to pleasure or to stability, security. But in trying to hold on to it, we have lost it. Like if you wanted to hold on to your breath for as long as you can, you want breath. That's what you want. So you think, I'll hold on to it. Well, in doing so, you've ended up losing it. It's the wanting to secure it that is actually the trigger for not having it at all. And I think I do really like that analogy for so much of life, that trying to pin it down is what stops you from having it. I even wonder I'm just thinking out loud now, but whether there's an element of that to love. I mean, we have the idiom of is it an idiom of if you love, or just a saying, if you love something, you have to be able to let it go. I think that's saying exactly the same thing, that to truly love someone, like if you really love your child, it's not the most loving thing to do to hold on to them forever. You have to watch them, let them go, watch them make terrible mistakes and just see what happens. Like that is a part of loving them dearly. And there's so many different ways in which this applies to our life, that to really experience something, to really have an emotion, is to let it change and have those ups and downs, or ins and outs, or back and forths. So the other slight, I don't know if it's a criticism, but another thought I had while reading this was about how there's a very natural biological mechanism that we have to protect our brains, which does this kind of separation of I from my current experience. Anyone who's been through anything very traumatic will know that your brain, as a natural protective instinct, will take you out of that moment, will take you to some other experience, past, present, future, like just take you away from being in your body because it's having such an unpleasant experience. But apparently that is a natural protective mechanism by your brain. If something is incredibly traumatic to observe, your brain will naturally put down barriers in place to separate you, to bring some kind of stability back to the experience, and not. But if the emotion is too overwhelming, your brain puts down these barriers to separate you from it. So I thought that was interesting that, you know, he's saying we should try as much as possible to come back to these, to really experience every moment. And I guess I was thinking sometimes that's not only not desirable, but biologically we're being protected from that by our own brains. I do also think, though, that perhaps it is more evidence for his view that anyone who does go through something like some kind of traumatic experience, one of the most successful forms of therapy for that is a kind of reintegration of whatever the memory was, to go back and talk through or feel through or experience that emotion at a later date in a safer setting with the right kind of person, whether that's a therapist, a friend, to re-experience, but in a safer environment, whatever the traumatic experience was, and to be able to reintegrate the memory and put it in its place. I thought that does kind of confirm his view that the only way to really live life is to experience each moment as it comes, and that in those moments, in like these traumatic examples where you get a memory that gets taken out of place entirely, it's something that gets repeatedly relived through flashbacks or dreams or memories, and that's often because it was something that we weren't able to fully live through in that moment. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a concluding thought on that, but I thought it was interesting. And he relates a lot of this to words and our ability to, or our desire to name things. And that putting words to things, we are able to categorize them and make them solid and stable. When we name emotions, we are able to put them into a neat little category and box and say what we like and dislike based on those names, but that naming is always to some degree inaccurate. It can never capture the actual experience of a thing.
What color is the sky behind me? But don't use any words to describe it. Aren't you immediately brought way closer to the sunset when you take the word away? Try this with anything in your life, your friends, your family, your hand, a table.
I partially agree and I partially disagree. Naming things is incredibly useful. The only way that we are able to function as a society is through this amazing tool of language and the ability to refer to objects in the world using sounds. I can ask for an apple and I know what you will hand over to me, unless you are very silly and you don't know what an apple is. But the word apple is no replacement for the experience of an apple. If I said, oh, can you hand me an apple? And you hand me the sound an apple, I'm going to be very disappointed and hungry. So it sounds silly. I know it sounds silly, but it does make a difference, I guess, that we are constantly, because this is the main tool we have to think and to communicate, we are constantly having to pin things down and put them in little categories. And in doing so, we are reducing what the actual experience of life is. He says that to name things kind of reduces our anxiety about them, but life is overwhelming. The experience of life is overwhelming, and there comes a point when naming things and trying to get clarity and be sure about things just doesn't cut it anymore. The experience is overwhelming, and we just have to go with that. Interestingly, he also kind of criticizes philosophy in a way, because speculative philosophy, the kind that is really what we see in Western philosophy, is constantly attempting to define and understand. It's a science, really. Western philosophy is very much like an attempt to be very specific about what we can be sure about in the world and what we can't. And we're trying to define it and verbalize it and define it, is the way he describes it. And we will always fail at that attempt. We will always fail, because the experience, the totality of experience of life cannot be defined in those neat little categories, which I do think is very interesting, because I have spent a lot of my time looking for answers. And in some ways, I don't think that's a negative thing, because I've learned so much through the process of thinking about these things and discovering. And also, I've enjoyed that process. But I think it is a helpful reminder sometimes to know that you cannot capture what it means to live and to experience a life. You can't capture that in neat language. It's already a language of its own. It's this language of experience. To try and translate that to kind of a fewer dimensioned means of expression, like verbal or written communication, is just always going to. It's a doomed mission, but it's not going to stop me trying. I don't know. It's not going to stop me trying to understand it. That's for sure. I also like his analogy that to live a life is a dance. It's not somewhere it's not a walk. It's not like we're walking to somewhere there's not a final destination. There is sort of a final destination. We're going to die. But that's again another experience. There's not an end point to be feared, he's saying, because death, just like any other moment, when it comes, it will be something that we experience in its entirety. We can't, there's no nothing to anticipate beyond that. If we truly experience everything in each individual moment, then death is just another one of those moments. And anticipating positive or negative experience is a mistake. And what he ends the book with is a reflection on the fact that people who are very interested in their I, constantly trying to evolve and maintain and be a better I, become very uninteresting people. You're reflecting. If you only ever reflect inwards, you sort of have nothing to reflect upon. And the most beautiful natural law, all we can do really is he's saying, reflect outwards, experience each moment, and experience each person, each thing, each experience totally as we are. We are mirrors, he says, to everything that is around us. And if we reflect outwards, we have the ability to mirror the whole of reality. If we only reflect inwards, then all we ever are is just this, a mirror reflecting on itself reflects nothing. It's just this infinite trail downwards of emptiness. Whereas a mirror that's reflected out to the world is has the ability to reflect everything. I like the idea that he ends the book with as well. This was sort of in the very last page, basically, that we're actually fortunate to live in a time where science has taken us to these such distant knowledge that we become so aware that really we know nothing. When we think about the smallest fundamental particles that make up everything around us, when you start to think about it, I get dizzy when I start to think about, being made of atoms, which then, have electrons within them, and then, the fundamental particles that make up these atoms, and that, how much of me is empty space. It sometimes makes you feel genuinely a bit sick. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the knowing, what we do about outer space. And you just have we're just stuck in the middle between these two unbelievable extremes of reality. Knowing these things, just the dizzying nonsense of it all, he's saying is in a way a really amazing thing, because it's showing us how trying to grasp certainty is a futile task. We can simply live through this experience and enjoy what we learn and discover along the way. And I thought that was a very lovely sentiment, and I enjoyed this immensely, and I think other people will too. Or you can just have listened to me ramble about it and take what you will from what I've said. Either way. Okay, I need to go and drink some tea, I think, some lemon and ginger tea. I think making a video when I've got major brain fog was maybe a mistake, but all I'm doing is experiencing this moment as it comes. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful collection of experienced present moments throughout your day today and on into the future. And if our present moments cross again, then, well, I hope they do. I hope our present moments cross again. Maybe I'll start ending all my conversations like that.